she's doing a mismatch, right? Because he's different when he's drunk than when he's sober.
How young would he need to be before he would like him that way?
How young? Now that's a different thing.
Matching him to a child.
Okay, if you were to do a straight match to a child, you'd go, how is he like a child?
Which of his physical qualities don't change?
There you go. That's a straight match. How is he the same? How is, and we might stack the deck a little bit more too. How is your sense of his inner self or the real him? What are the qualities that are still there in him when he's drunk that are there that you see and recognize when he's sober and appreciate? Or how are the wonderful qualities still there when he's drunk but harder to recognize? What are the qualities that you really like that are also there when he's drunk as than when he's sober is the basic form of these?
That would take a long time to sort that part out.
Yeah. And it might begin, what that tends to do is it begins to collapse anchors on the two states. Rather than sort for difference and go, oh, those are totally two different boxes. It's oh, actually, he's the same human being that I love, even when it's just that he's drinking at this time. And, might take more time to build on that, but you get the example, right?
Match versus mismatch means
we're going for similarity rather than going for difference. And, yes?
Well, I was going to collapsing anchor is interesting. Where are the emotions that he has when he's drunk? Where are those emotions when he's sober?
Okay, now there's no comparison in that.
Well, it's the other way across. Where is the same thing when he's sober? Where is that when he's drunk? Where's the qualities when what's going on when he's drunk?
I see.
When he's sober?
Okay, I got it. Now I understand. I understand. Okay, so that's the thing of how, in what ways are the drunk qualities actually also present when he's sober, but perhaps harder to see. So it's that same thing there.
He doesn't have to get drunk, maybe.
So how are those two actually the same? I get it now. Thank you. And I think one nice thing about taking this list and just going down the list, one category after the other, and knowing what category you're on and purposefully doing an example of that can be so expansive. For this reason, he says one, and it's like, I don't get how that's anything like this. And he explains it to me, and now, I understand his thinking on it. And it makes it clear that we're actually varying our behavior. Ben?
It might also be a hidden comparison with somebody else who started drinking a little and then started drinking much too much and ended up trashing their lives.
Nice observation. Sometimes there are those kind of hidden comparisons that we have and sometimes aren't even aware of it. It's like I know this person went down that path and I sure don't want him to.
How do we work with that? Because that's a classic in working with parents and children.
We might go to the thing we would go then to the thing of, well, how's this a problem? And then we'd get it. Well, he's going to totally trash his life. How do you know that? Well, Uncle Joe did. And then you go, how is he different than Uncle Joe? And we could go, we could play further here. If we were, the next thing I'd probably go to is what kind of relationship does she want to have with her son? And more about we need to get back to the initiated and maintained by self stuff, right? Because we're not going to solve his drinking thing here and now, but we can have a different response from within. And this is something, sometimes, many of you are parents in this room, and so we've all faced this kind of thing. We may not have a son or daughter who drinks, but we've all had a child. If we have any child, we can guarantee that they've done something we don't like. And we've had a hard time accepting. So that's where we can all relate to this kind of thing. And when this is one of my strategies for working with someone, too, and finding solutions. Is I think of the match between their experience and mine. And I go, well, I've dealt with that. I've had children who have done things that I didn't like, and I had a hard time accepting it. And what's helpful to me? What brings me to a new place with that? We've all been children, too. Good point. Done things our parents didn't like. Yeah. So, this afternoon we get to do a new game. Actually, it'll be a new game, yes. Some of you might think initially that it's a similar game to something you've done before. But actually, I think it will be a whole new experience, because what we're going to do now is take the time to let all of the different sensitizations that you have at this point towards language begin to integrate more while you do a complete piece of work with each other, with language alone. So, in other words, you'll be taking what you did with Meta Model 3 earlier, but now you'll have the opportunity to notice how much more enriched your observation is, as well as the things that emerge out of you, the responses. Because now you don't have to stick with one pattern. No assistant will come around and say, yes, but it's not the one we're doing now. This won't happen to you now. You're safe from this. So I think if I can give you an example, to give you just one more piece of data, and then if you'd like, we could also play around with just some starting lines a little bit more. Just starting complaints and what kind of questions should we start in asking. If you'd like, we could do a little bit of that. And what presuppositions do we hear? Okay. So this one comes from Steve, and I use it with the example with his full permission. He signed a form that said, I told him my degrees and all of the rest. And he believed me. What can I say? So this was in the phase when we were, actually, I was sitting at some other workshop, and I didn't have anything to do, and so I was bored with what was being taught, and I decided I wanted to learn language patterns, and Steve was there too, and he agreed that we could do that. So he would let me have one of his limitations to play with. And what he started with was, let's see, certain people do things that make me outraged. I get outraged was the starting place. Well, how do you know when to? Well, certain people do certain things that outrage me. Well, what kind of things? And, well, it's these things that that make the world a worse place. They just do these things that they'll make the world a worse place, and it outrages me. And so I was just playing around with anything that came to mind to just find out what would happen. And that's the fun of doing it here, too. I think since everyone's in on it, you can feel full permission to explore and say something that might seem outrageous and just find out, does it actually do something interesting and useful? So one of the things I asked him was, well, we asked him, what was the purpose of getting outraged? Well, it's that I want the world to be a better place, so it really annoys me when they do these things. And I said, well, how long would you need to get outraged to serve that purpose before you could just go on to having another response? I thought, that could work on somebody, but it didn't work on him, right? No useful response. So he says, that doesn't make any sense. See, what I was hoping for is that he might think in terms of a certain time limit, and we could go maybe, well, would a split second be long enough? Maybe a tenth of a second to serve that purpose, and then you could just go on to something else. But this didn't register for him. So another thing that I tried, see, he said he wanted to do this so that the world would be a better place. And I said, well, does your getting angry and outraged make the world a better place? I thought that sounded pretty good. Didn't make a bit of difference. And again, it might have worked with someone else. That's apply to self, right? Might have worked well with someone else, but it didn't have an impact for him. So we kept going and asking some more questions about how he knows when to get outraged and that kind of thing. And I went for a counterexample. I asked, well, do you get outraged whenever anyone does something to make the world a worse place, like everything that President Reagan does? Do you do you get outraged at all that? And he goes, no. And I said, well, what's different there about that than the ones that you do get outraged? Anytime you get something like that, you can find out what's the difference, and that will help. That'll be crucial information. And he said, well, that's not in my sphere of influence. That has nothing to do with me. And so I don't get outraged about that. So what's he telling me? I mean, it's not personally involved, because there are a lot of these examples. In fact, most of them he wasn't personally involved in, but he considered it in his domain of influence. Yeah, and there again, to really, do you hear the difference in the personal involvement? For Steve would be irrelevant, but the domain of influence would be relevant. So, and then I was asking some more questions, and at another point he said, well, what really gets me outraged is that I can't do anything about it. You know, they do these things, and I can't do a thing about it. So at one point I thought, oh, let me try this. I said, so how is it possible that you have to do something that you can't do? I missed one building up piece. Earlier, at 2 different points in time, once he told me he had to do something about it because it was in his domain of influence. And at another point in time, he said, what's so frustrating is that he can't do anything. So how is it possible that you have to do something that you can't do? And that's the one that got the smoke out of the ears in this case. He sat there and he looked, and the steam started coming out. And he started laughing, and he said, what did you just say? Whatever that was, write that down. That was the right one. So, and he could not remember it later on. He couldn't remember what it was until I repeated it back, and then he recognized it. But he didn't have conscious recall at first. And he described what happened for him was that he'd had these 2 things as separate images, that I must do something because it's in my domain of influence. And then there's these experiences that go along with, I can't do anything about this kind of thing. Nothing will work. And that brought these 2 images together, and one had to go. It's the way he put his response. So does that make sense? Yeah. Is that any help or use? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, would you like to play with several beginnings, too? Would that be helpful? Okay. Here's what I need then. To have you think of, when you pair up this afternoon, do you have a certain limitation or outcome that you would like, personally, to go for? Do you have one? And somebody who has one can just say what it is, and we'll just start. We'll just start, and together we'll listen for what are the presuppositions that we hear in this. Okay? So, anyone have anything like that you'd be willing to share some content on? Yeah.
I'll do my one on marriage is like death.
Okay, good choice. Yeah, that's worth changing. It's always good to pick one that's worth changing. Okay, so marriage is like death. So how's this a problem for you, though? I mean, if I were you, I'd just avoid it, and that'd be that. And so how's that a problem? So it sounds like solved, Death, avoid it.
Well, I'm with this man that I'd like to marry, but that's real up again about how it's kind of like the end of life if you get married.
The end of life if you get married. Now, can I go ahead and start? Will you let me? All right, and again, everything that you do is either information gathering or intervention. And so we'll just find out which. So she's going, and by the way, the first piece that I did, I could have done that by asking some straight questions. But sometimes by throwing it out in a more ludicrous sort of way, you get a more loosening. You have a more loosening impact already. So there's more groundwork laid for when you do the ones that turned out that they were interventions. Okay, so there's this guy, and you kind of like him, and thinking about marriage, but then again, you don't really want to end your life. Is this the deal?
Yeah, or my life it's like the picture is, it gets really dull. The lights are down, it's dark, the movement is real slow.
Okay, so Carol, in what way, I mean, obviously that's not the choice that you want to live with. Mm-hmm. So in what way, now that you think about it, can marriage actually be a birth of something?